Feels like it's officially time for Lions football, as today we were given the list of placements for injuries for the Lions heading into this year's training camp. So not great news, but it is news. So let's get right into it. So today we have some injury placements for the Lions. We'll go through that news. And then also we have a player that was waived, one of our undrafted free agent signings. And the Lions are also bringing in another player at that position for a workout. So we'll talk about those two things. But I'm sure you've seen the news by now, but if you haven't, Levi Injury headlines the Lions' placements on these injury list or illness list. And we start off with Levi Injury, who is placed on the reserve PUP list, which means that he's going to miss the first 4 games of this upcoming season, which is a massive blow. I think this could be a massive year for Levi to potentially earn that large contract extension. Maybe that's here, or maybe just a large contract elsewhere, but a big contract this offseason. If he had literally the exact same season that he had last year he was relatively healthy. He was incredibly versatile for us this past season, and he had a really strong, I think, breakout towards the end of last year. Minnesota, he was dominant as a pass rusher. I think that was the first time that I walked away feeling like this dude was dominant, and I thought heading into this year with the opportunity due to the guys that we were going to be missing early, and he could still do this, but not within the first 4 weeks, that opportunity is going to present itself once again. And the flexibility that he adds between DN and DT is so valuable because he was productive at both spots. But now, as we know, he's going to miss the first 4 games of the season, which is not great because we already know Lee McNeil is not likely going to be ready by the beginning of the season. We might have Mekhi Wingo by the beginning of the season. We'll talk about that here in a second. So that positional group, which to me is one of the deeper positional groups, I would say somewhat on the team. I think we have about 7 defensive linemen that I think are going to be positive players, both as run defenders and as pass rushers. But this is one of the key pieces to that, especially early in the year, and that opportunity to really take off early in the year in this system. But knowing that he's going to miss the first 4 games is a tough blow. So what's next up? Well, we still, of course, have DJ Reader. He's going to be expected to start regardless. I could see a lot of Roy Lopez early on. His flexibility, his ability to play nose and kind of be the backup nose to Reader is valuable, but he's also shown the ability to line outside of a guard, give a little pass rush juice. I think Roy Lopez could be, who was already kind of a little under the radar as a signing. I think he's going to sign a multi-year deal after this year as kind of a rotational piece for us. Well, he's got a real opportunity to really earn some money and earn it very quickly for the Lions. But then also Tyleik Williams, right? We already expect him to play a lot early on in the season, even with Levi, because Levi could be bouncing around at DN because of the depth there. However, now Tyleik Williams is definitely going to be getting some early snaps. There's no doubt this guy's going to be playing a lot early for the Lions. And the good thing is that Tyleik Williams didn't show up on any of these lists. You know, we had heard during some of the rookie mini camp that they were being kind of cautious with Tyleik Williams. And maybe now you wonder if some of this had to do with the Levi news that they knew of, because I wonder what it is exactly with Levi. We don't really have the updates there as of now. I'm sure we'll get them soon. But like last season, he dealt with a little bit of a hammy last year. He has kind of a history, the back issues that he had to deal with, but a little bit of a hammy kind of played through it for us this past year. So you wonder if it's that or if it's something potentially new that we don't really know about. Of course, placing him on the reserve PUP list means that they're expecting that it's going to take some time for him to be right. It also opens the door, right? Mekhi Wingo, we'll have to just see when he's ready to go. Him being ready earlier would definitely help now. But guys like Broderick Martin, Pat O'Connor, Chris Smith, who was our backup nose tackle this past season, for me, Miles Adams, like that group of guys that felt like, okay, there's about 4 dudes right here. I don't know if any of them are going to make the team, but I'd like to see what that battle shakes out to be. Now there's a real opportunity for one of those guys to sneak in. Maybe multiple. Raekwon Williams, the addition that the Lions made, the veteran, after coming in for a trial. Maybe he has now an opportunity that the door kind of opened a little bit there as a guy that maybe doesn't bring a ton of juice as a rusher, but as a big body can play the run for sure. So there is some potential openings now on the interior specifically, and I think a guy that would fit in very stylistically similar to a guy like Levi would be Miles Adams. His ability to line up like a 3-4 DN, play outside shoulder of a guard if you want him to do this well, bring a lot of juice as a rusher, and then of course fit into the scheme really well as a run defender. Last year kind of got a taste of that. I think he'd fit in really well. So I like what this does, and it kind of opens the doors for some flexibility because you don't have to exactly be a Levi clone to make it make sense. You just need depth. So because of that, any guy that can help out on the defensive line because of some of your flexibility could potentially have that door open for them a little bit more, especially at the DN position when you also have Josh Paschal on one of these lists, and hopefully he's ready to go by the time we get this thing started. But you have Ahmed, who's a rookie, Muhammad, who I like his chances of making the team this year. But now again, maybe the door opens a little bit more for one of these undrafted free agents like a Nate Lynn last year or a Keith Cooper, who I liked out of Houston, or maybe a Mitchell Agude or Uku to finally kind of take that step and then become a guy that actually makes the team. Are players that are declared non-football injury related, something outside of football, and those two players listed are Josh Paschal and Stanley Thomas Oliver. Paschal's in for a massive season, final year of his rookie deal. I think we listed him on like the most surprising potential cut this offseason. I think obviously this helps his chances. I also think this is important for his role as well, because I had mentioned before that I think Josh Paschal earning a larger deal or just a multi-year deal here or elsewhere this offseason, I think one of the big parts that he's going to have to kind of settle into is on third down. Can you kind of separate yourself as like, I'm a good sub-package rusher. You can kick me inside and I'm effective there, because I think that's always kind of been a vision for Josh. We weren't really able to get to that this past season. Like that kind of the vision was, I think, when we selected him, knowing that he wasn't going to bring a ton of juice on the outside, so you didn't want to leave him there. We didn't get to it that much this last year because of all the missing pieces. However, now without Levi, that door really opens for like, hey, anybody that can kick inside and rush over a guard and be impactful as a stunt rusher or someone that just can win. His first step, his quickness shows off a lot better there. I think his pass rushing skill set shows off a lot better there as well. And he shows, I mean, if you look at it statistically, almost all of his pressures this past season came from the interior, and he rarely aligned there. So I did a full video on this, but Josh Paschal is in a really good opportunity. So hopefully he's able to get going. And then Stanley Thomas Oliver, we haven't really seen as a Lion, right? You had to go back a couple of years in the preseason playing the cornerback spot, but fits in well, physical press corner, showed some real quickness underneath. And then we go to the largest list, which are players that are placed on the PUP list. Now, the key to this, obviously different than the reserve PUP list, is that these players can be activated at any time once they are medically cleared. If a player is activated, he can't be placed back on this list. So once he does practice, you can't place him back on this list. He can be involved in everything outside of practice. For a guy like Levi being on the reserve PUP list, he, of course, won't count towards the roster. Guys on the active PUP list will count towards the Lions 90-man roster. So a couple of differences there. It does clear up a roster spot for the Lions. They could go look at signing another defensive lineman somewhere here shortly just to add some depth back to that room, understanding that he's going to miss some time. But for the active guys, that's not the case. There are a lot of players here, though. Guys, these are just players that you're really not expecting to be ready for camp. That's why you placed them on this list, but you can take them off this list. So hopefully it doesn't last incredibly long here. We start off with Khalil Dorsey. So we have Stanley Thomas Oliver and now Khalil Dorsey as well. You keep it on Rocky Sin. It's definitely an opportunity early on to get rolling. Khalil Dorsey did get banged up this past year towards the end of the season against the Buffalo Bills. He had a right tibia/fibula fracture. Remember, he ran right into Ezekiel Turner. It looked really bad. Has drawn some similarities to, I think, the Aiden Hutchinson situation as well. So he could be down for a little bit. We'll have to keep an eye on the whole Khalil Dorsey situation. But again, definitely opens the door for a guy like Rocky Sin to get rolling. And hopefully it's not that serious. You also have Taylor Decker on this list. Taylor Decker, we don't miss some time this past year. He had the shoulder injury. He ended up missing the Houston Texans game. Also had some ankle/knee issues this past year. Didn't miss a ton of time, but missed a little bit this past year. Dan Skipper got a few starts this past season, which the value there, if you're looking for it, is Giovanni Manu, who's definitely going to get some good reps, as well as Dan Skipper continuing to get those. But Giovanni Manu now in year 2. Colby Sorsel at right tackle. I think they're probably going to keep him there. Maybe they try to move around, but I think they keep him there. Second year back at kind of like, hey, let's go to right tackle again like you were back in college. Of course, you have Mason Miller. So from a depth perspective, it's fantastic for competition. It also could open the door for some flexibility of like, hey, Miles Frazier gets a couple of snaps on the outside, but Miles Frazier also is on this list as well, so maybe I shouldn't list him there. And then I would look at Jamarco Jones. He played like the one preseason game. It was actually pretty good from a productive standpoint, but when you actually watched it, it didn't look as pretty. It seemed like a lot of technical things could be an issue there in a regular season game. So keep an eye on that one. Miles Frazier, who also had ankle issues this past season with LSU, is listed on this list as well. Hopefully nothing super serious, but he was kind of in and out due to that this past year. Of course, Aleem McNeil. Interesting that he actually wasn't placed on the reserve PUP list. I mean, my expectation would be it'd be a little bit further down the road. Actually ended up tearing his ACL and, haven't gone through that as well. Like, that's a pretty significant time frame. Now, hey, I was told at the time like 6 months could be the fastest you could have it ready as an athlete in that position. Depending on how you do the surgery, if you take it from your own body, then you could potentially get there. Like, that's on the high end. And with their recovery, maybe you get something somewhat close to that. I would still be shocked if it was that fast, but maybe there's a potential that he's ready to go by then. I'd be pretty surprised, but he was listed on here. We also have Mekhi Wingo, who had the torn meniscus this past season, which isn't expected to be as long. They were talking about kind of returning to his normal form before the injury, so maybe he is ready by the beginning of the season. It'd be nice to have that. It'd be definitely nice to have that with Aleem McNeil. And then finally, you would have Malcolm Rodriguez on this list as well, which, similar to Aleem McNeil, is interesting. Also tore his ACL. That was at the end of November. It was against Chicago, so he also you would think is on a pretty significant timeline. But again, both those guys kind of in the same category, both on the active PUP list. That's the list for the Lions. The other notable thing here is Anthony Tyus, the undrafted free agent signing the University of Ohio, spent 3 years with Northwestern, was waived non-football illness. So one of the two backs the Lions brought in to compete with Vaki and Craig Reynolds, as well as Kai Robichaux. Meanwhile, the Lions have went out and it was announced that they were working out running back from the Michigan Panthers, Taua, 25-year-old running back, was at Nevada back in college, was sixth in rushing yards, 4.4 yards per carry in this past season for the Panthers. Didn't really do much from a receiving perspective production-wise, but when you watch him, you could see why they would want competition with a guy like this, similar to Anthony Tyus, who is a pretty physical back as well. That's what they kind of have here with some of these UDFA signings. And I think with Craig Reynolds, special teams value, he played as an up back on their kickoff return team. You know, he was kind of their other returner that usually wasn't getting the ball unless it was short, but he'd kind of lead the way for the returner. But then also as just a pure back, he was still valuable on third downs, even though he didn't really have any receiving production. He made some nice catches. I don't know how well he's going to actually separate, similar to Craig Reynolds. Craig Reynolds has hands as well. But as a pass protector, he shined. I mean, this guy was just taking dudes out of their cleats, putting them on the ground constantly. I mean, you felt like, oh, man, absolute kind of chip flat, check release, kind of like this is his game. Check release all day long, hit somebody and get out into the flat, just do something underneath. That feels like it could very much so be impactful, and it left him on the field. He was able to identify blitzers. He stood in. He attacked guys. He was fearless. He was really stout in his frame, wide-based when he took on contact. That ability in pass protection, I think, shined through for some of the third down value specifically. Maybe can he be a lead back in some spots where he can kind of lead the way, clear a way out as like a fullback? Potentially, maybe he could show some of that as well. But with the ball in his hands, there was still some good there as well. His vision seemingly kind of played into a guy that had some scheme flexibility. Definitely downhill between the tackles, more like inside zone. I wondered a little bit if him getting a little bit tunnel vision when it felt like he got a lot of traffic around him, but his ability to follow lead blockers, fit into a gap scheme felt very noticeable. You also felt some of the shiftiness laterally. There was a little bit of shake to his game, some elusiveness that popped, which was pretty noticeable. He didn't feel he was able to get overly skinny. Also in his cuts, he wasn't super tight, and he didn't feel like he had much juice when he got in and out of cuts, right? Everything kind of just felt a little bit slower in those spots. So some good foot quickness, so it did allow him to change some directions and work in some short area spaces. So I definitely understand the style, what the Lions are going after here in terms of some of the competition that they're bringing in. He showed the leg drive. He showed downhill ability. Like, I mean, he was running over dudes. He was a finisher. Played a little bit tall, but he was absolutely a finisher as a runner. Speaking to that, there was a little clip of Sam LaPorta speaking on having John Morton as the Lions' new offensive coordinator this year. And I just want to touch on this really quickly because he hit on a couple of things, but the one thing that stuck out to me was what he said about the run game. Of course, you know, he had excitement for what he was as a pass game coordinator. That's kind of just been his thing. That's where he's coming from with Denver. But what he said about the running game and how the running game's language was the same, with Hank Fraley now becoming the run game coordinator this year, which I know I pointed out during last season, like, hey, I felt like there was kind of a lull there towards the middle of the season where we weren't as creative. We were kind of straightforward. And then I thought towards the back end of the season, we got super creative as a rushing attack, and we started to get back to being very multiple as a team. We were really tough to deal with. And maybe some of that was just development and growth from some of those guys along in the running back spot, and also some changes at guard. But ultimately, keeping him around and keeping that the same. The big thing that I would state there is we know that the Lions' flexibility is what it's all about. Like the Lions last season for Penei Sewell, he had like 330 zone snaps, but 170 gap snaps. So they're still much more of a zone rushing team than they are a gap rushing team as pulling offensive linemen or more of the power scheme. They're still much more of a zone team, but they've shown that ability to do both. I think Craig's always thrived as a gap scheme back. That flexibility has always been the key. The Lions have been able to kind of get to everything that they want to. They've had the O-line, they've had the athleticism to do that, and they've been able to get really creative with how they use Penei Sewell as a puller, his ability to kind of move block as his own blocker, where he's able to get out of his lane and go give support. Like the Lions have been very versatile in the way they can run the football, and they have the backs to do it as well. So that was the thing that actually stuck out to me, because I thought at times it was a little up and down this past year, but that's where everything does kind of start. And I think clearly hearing Sam LaPorta say that gives you a lot of confidence about things kind of getting off and rolling. I'm really not that concerned about the offense, the whole offensive coordinator thing. We did a full video if you want to check it out. It's out there. I did it on John Morton like a couple months ago. So definitely go check that out. Look that one up. But ultimately, like that one doesn't really concern me. I think that we're going to hit the ground running offensively. One, because of the players that we have, because John Morton has done a really good job as a pass game coordinator from what I've seen, and specifically just working the pass game, even just as an OC. So to hear that news makes me even more confident about what it's going to look like to get things started. But I'm going to leave it there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. It is officially time for Lions football. Thank you, Pride, for watching, and I'm out.